I agree, because if students live in the dorm during the first 1 or 2 years of college, they can make more friends. For example, I remember during my very first month of my very first year in college, I did not live in the dorm. Instead, I was living by myself, so I was quite lonely because I had no one to talk to after coming back from school. However, everything changed after I moved into the dorm because of school's requirement. There, I could always find someone to talk to whenever I was in trouble. Someone would help me. So I wasn't lonely anymore, and I made a lot of friends through all these wonderful interactions with my wonderful dorm mates. That's why I believe that it's actually better for first year and second year students who live in dorm. The university announces that recorded lectures will remain accessible till end of the academic year. However, the woman disagrees. She thinks it's unnecessary. First of all, she does not believe all students need to revisit complex material. In fact, she says she rarely goes back to those materials because she has learned most of the things she needed during the semester. Also, she says she usually just uses her notes to prepare for exams like the final exams. So her notes are totally sufficient for her. Secondly, she did not mention about students missing classes, but she did mention that storing a lot of files on that platform will be very costly for the school. Actually, she also mentions that there was a professor that told her that the system will slow down because of so many files in the system. The file storage is an issue. It is a big problem, so that's why she disagrees. Spaced repetition is a learning method in which people remember things through review sessions that are spread out over time rather than concentrated in a period. And the professor explains it with one example. First, he mentions that when he was a college freshman, he once had to learn hundreds of biology terms. He tried learning them overnight. However, he found out that he only recognized them in the moment. Soon he forgot, he struggled to remember. That is to say, although he had instant familiarity over some terms, it was just surface level memory. After a while, he decided to try spaced repetition. He reviewed one day after he studied. Although each time it was a small struggle, however, after months, the terms became more stable. He could recall a lot of the terms without cues. That is to say, the longer spacing, the increasing spacing allows him to remember things in fewer total hours. In the end, he found out that this is more efficient. First, the professor mentions emotional branding. To be more specific, companies do not talk about the details of the products. They talk about the good emotions of using their product, like joy. And she uses the Coca-Cola company as an example. In their ads, people are always smiling. So when people think of Coca-Cola, they think about not just a drink, but a symbol of positive emotions. That is to say, people buy the feeling of drinking Coke. This strategy leads to long-term loyalty. Secondly, the professor mentions scarcity marketing. This creates urgency because consumers don't want to miss out on good opportunities. And she uses a sneaker company as an example. This company sells small and limited quantity of their shoes. Although this strategy pushes sales fast, but the effect is short term. That is to say, the appeal ends once the sales of the rare items ends. However, it still increases attention around product launch. It helps the company a lot. That's how the professor explains.